Hashtag the human ambassador. The crystalline spires of the Zephyrian capital stretched toward three burning suns, their surfaces reflecting rainbow patterns across the vast city below. In the heart of this alien metropolis, within the Grand Council chamber, Queen Zarathul stood before the assembled representatives of 47 galactic civilizations. Her four arms spread wide, her violet skin shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that indicated deep emotion. The chamber fell silent. Even the ever-chattering Vicari delegates ceased their clicking sounds. The floating gas form representatives of nebulos dimmed their inner lights. All eyes, sensors, and perception organs focused on the towering figure of the Zephyrian queen. "My daughter shall wed the human," Queen Zarathul declared, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones that made Zephyrian's speech so compelling. The translation devices throughout the chamber worked frantically to convey not just her words, but the emotional weight behind them. Ambassador Kethvar of the Corvarian Empire was the first to break the stunned silence. His scaled head swiveled on his serpentine neck as he rose from his delegation's platform. "Your Majesty, surely you jest. The human species has been part of galactic civilization for barely a standard cycle. They are primitive." Queen Zarathul's secondary arms gestured dismissively, while her primary hands remained clasped behind her back. "Primitive? Ambassador Kethvar, when did you last review the humans' contributions to our galaxy? Perhaps your intelligence networks are not as comprehensive as you believe." The Corvarian's yellow eyes narrowed. His people had dominated the Eastern Spiral Arm for 3 millennia, building an empire through calculated aggression and superior technology. The idea that newcomers, humans who still use chemical propulsion when they first achieved spaceflight, could be worthy of alliance with the ancient Zephyrian dynasty was absurd. "Your Majesty," Kethvar continued, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air, "the humans have shown nothing but reckless behavior since joining our community. They've involved themselves in conflicts that were none of their concern, ignored established protocols, and their military tactics are unconventional at best." A soft laugh echoed from the human delegation's platform. All attention turned to Commander Sarah Chun, the human ambassador who had been quietly observing the proceedings. She stood slowly, her simple gray uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate robes and biological displays of the other delegates. At average human height, she was dwarfed by most of the alien representatives, yet something in her bearing commanded respect. "Unconventional," she repeated, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "I suppose that's one way to describe it, Ambassador Kethvar." The Corvarian's head tilted. "You find something amusing in this situation, human?" Commander Chin smiled, and several delegates shifted uncomfortably. They had learned that human expressions could be deceptive. "I find it interesting that you mention our military tactics, particularly considering what happened at Proxima Station." A ripple of unease passed through the chamber. Proxima Station had been a Corvarian stronghold, considered impregnable, until 3 months ago, when a small human fleet had somehow infiltrated the system and liberated 2 million enslaved Altarians without firing a single shot. "That was an anomaly," Kethvar hissed. "Luck and deception, nothing more." "Was it luck when we stopped the void plague from reaching the core worlds?" Commander Chin asked, taking a step forward. "Was it deception when we shared our medical knowledge freely, asking for nothing in return?" Another delegate, the crystalline representative from Andromex Prime, chimed in with musical tones. "The humans did indeed halt the plague's spread using techniques unknown to our best scientists. Their biological adaptability is remarkable." Queen Zarathul nodded approvingly. "Thank you, Delegate Harmony ST. Yes, the humans possess qualities that our galaxy desperately needs. They think differently, act differently, and achieve results that our traditional methods cannot." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of sounds as delegates from various species began arguing among themselves. The insectoid Threx clicked furiously in their complex language, while the energy beings from the Corona systems pulsed with agitated light patterns. The humanoid Centauri delegation whispered among themselves, their gray skin flickering with barely contained emotion. Queen Zarathul raised all 4 arms, and gradually the noise subsided. "I understand your concerns. The human species is young, yes. They're different from us in many ways. But Consider this. In the single standard cycle since they joined our community, they have prevented 3 wars, solved the Andorian refugee crisis, and contributed more technological innovations than some species have produced in centuries. Commander Chun remained standing, her hands clasped behind her back in a posture that mirrored the Queen's own stance. Your Majesty, while I'm honored by your proposal, I should point out that I'm not in a position to speak for all humanity regarding such matters. This would require extensive consultation with Earth's governing council. Of course, the Queen replied. I would expect nothing less from a species that values democratic processes. But understand, Commander Chun, this is not merely a political alliance I propose. Princess Lyra has expressed genuine interest in human culture and achievements. She has specifically requested to meet with human representatives. This revelation sent another wave of surprise through the chamber. Princess Lyra was known throughout the galaxy as one of the most brilliant scientific minds of her generation. Her research into quantum consciousness had revolutionized understanding of several species' neural processes. That she would show personal interest in humanity was significant. Ambassador Keth Var's tail thrashed behind him, a sign of extreme agitation. Your Majesty, with respect, the Corvarian Empire has been a faithful ally for 3,000 years. We have fought beside your forces, shared our technology, and maintained stable trade relationships. How can these newcomers compare to such proven loyalty? Queen Zarathal's bioluminescent patterns shifted to cooler blues and purples. Faithful, yes. But the galaxy is changing, Ambassador. The old ways of thinking, the established power structures, they're not adequate for the challenges we face. She gestured toward a holographic display that materialized in the center of the chamber. The three-dimensional image showed a map of the galaxy, with various colored zones indicating territorial control and current conflicts. Look at this map, the Queen continued. For the past millennium, our galaxy has been locked in the same patterns. The strong dominate the weak. Resources are controlled by ancient bloodlines and established empires. Progress comes slowly, if at all. Yet in 1 year, the humans have disrupted more stagnant situations than we've resolved in decades. Commander Chun studied the map, noting several areas where human intervention had indeed changed the status quo. The Rigel trade war had been ended through human mediation. The vegan blockade crisis had been resolved when human ships simply ignored the blockade and delivered humanitarian supplies, forcing both sides to negotiate. In each case, humans had acted when traditional diplomatic channels had failed. The humans possess something we have largely lost, Queen Zarathal continued. They have hope. They believe that seemingly impossible problems can be solved. They are willing to take risks that our more experienced civilizations would never consider. The floating delegate from Nebulos pulsed with curious orange light. This is all very philosophical, Your Majesty, but surely practical concerns must be addressed. The genetic compatibility alone has been thoroughly researched, the Queen interrupted. Our biotechnology has advanced considerably in recent centuries. Physical compatibility is not an insurmountable obstacle. More importantly, this union would create something unprecedented, a bridge between human innovation and Zephyrian wisdom. Commander Chun found herself genuinely intrigued by the proposal. Throughout her career, she had encountered many alien species, but the Zephyrians had always impressed her with their combination of advanced technology and philosophical depth. Their society had achieved something rare in the galaxy, genuine stability without stagnation. Your Majesty, she said carefully, assuming that extensive diplomatic consultations take place, what exactly would such a union hope to achieve? What challenges are you envisioning that require this combination of human innovation and Zephyrian wisdom? The Queen's expression grew grave. That, Commander Chun, brings us to information that most of this council is not yet aware of. With your permission, I would like to share intelligence that our deep space monitoring stations have recently gathered. She activated another control, and the holographic display changed. Instead of the familiar galactic map, a new image appeared. The dark space beyond the galactic rim, where few ships ventured and even fewer returned. Our longest-range sensors have detected something approaching from intergalactic space, Queen Zarathal announced. Something vast, artificial, and clearly not of our galaxy. Current projections suggest it will reach our outer systems within 5 standard years. The chamber fell absolutely silent. Even the background hum of life support systems seemed to pause. Commander Chun felt a chill run down her spine. How large? Approximately 12,000 kilometers in length for 1,000 in width. Its energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. And, Commander, the Queen paused, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to deep reds and blacks. It is not alone. Our sensors have identified at least 27 similar objects in formation. The implications hung heavy in the air. Ambassador Kethvar's aggressive posturing wilted as the magnitude of this threat became clear. The crystalline delegate from Andromex Prime began resonating at frequencies that indicated deep concern. This is why I proposed this union, Queen Zarathul continued. Not because of politics or trade agreements, but because our galaxy may be facing its greatest challenge in recorded history. We will need every advantage, every innovation, every unconventional solution we can find. The humans have repeatedly demonstrated their ability to find answers where others see only impossibility. Commander Chin's mind raced through the implications. Humanity's brief but eventful time in galactic politics had indeed been marked by unconventional solutions. When the Altarian plague had threatened to wipe out an entire species, human doctors had suggested using controlled infections of a related virus to build immunity, a technique considered dangerously primitive by galactic medical standards, but which had worked when more sophisticated approaches had failed. What do we know about these objects' intentions? She asked. Nothing definitive, the Queen admitted, but their trajectory takes them through 17 inhabited systems. If they're hostile, if they're seeking resources or territory. She let the sentence hang unfinished. The silence stretched until Ambassador Kethvar finally spoke, his voice lacking its earlier confidence. Your Majesty, if this threat is real, then surely all considerations of alliances and political maneuvering become secondary. We should be preparing our defenses, mobilizing our fleets. We are, the Queen replied, but conventional preparations may not be sufficient. If these entities possess technology capable of intergalactic travel, our standard defensive measures may prove inadequate. We need new thinking, new approaches. Commander Chin looked around the chamber, seeing the fear and uncertainty on alien faces that rarely showed such emotions. The proud Corvarians looked diminished. The ancient Centauri delegation appeared shaken. Even the energy beings of Corona seemed to flicker with anxiety. Your Majesty, she said finally, I will need to consult with Earth immediately. But I can tell you that if this threat is real, humanity will stand with our galactic neighbors regardless of political arrangements. We've learned that running from impossible odds rarely works. Sometimes you have to face them head-on. Queen Zarathul's patterns brightened with what appeared to be relief and approval. This is precisely why I believe in the value of human-Zephyrian cooperation. Your species' instinct to confront rather than flee has already saved countless lives. However, Commander Chin continued, I must ask, why marriage? Why not simply a formal military and scientific alliance? The Queen's four arms gestured in a complex pattern that conveyed deep meaning in Zephyrian culture. Because alliances can be broken when convenient. Because formal agreements can be reinterpreted or abandoned. But family, she paused, her violet skin taking on golden highlights. Family endures. Family fights together, even when victory seems impossible. The commander nodded slowly, beginning to understand the deeper implications of the proposal. This wasn't just about combining resources or technologies. It was about creating bonds that would hold even under the extreme pressure of an existential threat. There is something else, Queen Zarathul added quietly. Something that I have not yet mentioned. My daughter Lyraesh has been studying the sensor data from these approaching objects. She believes she has identified patterns in their energy signatures that others have missed. The chamber leaned forward collectively, sensing important information. She believes these entities may not be entirely artificial. There are biological components to their signatures, suggesting a fusion of organic and technological development that surpasses anything in our galaxy. If she is correct, our standard approaches to both diplomacy and warfare may prove completely inadequate. Commander Chun felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. And she thinks human perspectives might offer insights that more traditional galactic thinking cannot. She is convinced of it, the Queen confirmed. Princess Lyra has studied human problem-solving methodologies extensively. She believes that your species' tendency to make intuitive leaps, to try impossible solutions, could be crucial in understanding and responding to these entities. The weight of responsibility settled on Commander Chen's shoulders. She thought of Earth, of the billions of humans who had only recently learned they were part of a vast galactic community. Now, that community faced a threat from beyond known space, and somehow humanity was being asked to help find solutions. Your Majesty, she said formally, I will transmit your proposal to Earth immediately, along with all available data about this approaching threat. I cannot speak for my government's decision, but I can promise that we will give this matter our most serious consideration. That is all I can ask, the Queen replied. But, Commander, I hope you will also consider this. Sometimes the most important alliances are forged not in times of peace and prosperity, but in moments of greatest peril. What we choose to do in the next few months may determine the fate of every civilization in this galaxy. As the formal session concluded and delegates began filing out in urgent conversations, Commander Chun remained standing, staring at the holographic display that still showed those mysterious objects creeping closer to their galaxy. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she could almost hear the echo of her grandmother's voice, telling old stories about humans who had faced impossible odds and somehow found a way through. Perhaps, she thought, it was time for humanity to write a new chapter in that ancient tradition. Hashtag the princess and the proposal 3 weeks after the shocking announcement in the Galactic Council, Princess Lyra stood in her private laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays showing quantum mathematical equations that would have challenged the greatest minds in the galaxy. Her 4 hands moved in graceful coordination, manipulating data streams while her bioluminescent patterns flickered in rapid sequences that indicated intense concentration. The laboratory itself was a marvel of Zephyrian biotechnology. Living walls pulsed with a gentle rhythm, filtering the air and providing perfect lighting. Symbiotic computers grew, like coral formations throughout the space, their organic processors capable of calculations that purely mechanical systems could never achieve. At the center of it all, Princess Lyra worked with an intensity that had worried her attendants for days. A soft chime indicated an incoming communication. Without looking up from her work, she activated the receiver with a gesture of her lower left hand. Lyrish came the familiar voice of her mother, Queen Zarathal. The human delegation has arrived. The princess's patterns shifted to brighter hues, indicating surprise and anticipation. Already? I thought their fastest ships would take at least another week to reach our system. They came in something they called an experimental drive. Our traffic controllers barely had time to clear a landing corridor before they appeared in our outer atmosphere. There was a note of amusement in the Queen's voice. The humans continued to surprise us. Princess Lyra finally looked away from her equations, her large violet eyes focusing on the communication interface. Mother, before I meet with them, there's something you need to know. My analysis of the approaching entities, it's more disturbing than we initially thought. How so? The princess gestured, and her holographic displays shifted to show the sensor data from mysterious objects approaching their galaxy. Look at these energy patterns. At first, I thought they were simply advanced fusion signatures, possibly matter-antimatter reactions. But when I applied human mathematical frameworks to the analysis, she paused, manipulating the data to highlight specific frequency patterns. The energy signatures match theoretical predictions for quantum consciousness networks. These entities don't just have biological components. They appear to be vast, thinking organisms. Each ship, if we can call them that, may actually be a single living being of unimaginable intelligence and power. The silence from the communication link stretched for several moments. Finally, the Queen's voice returned, tight with concern. Are you certain of this analysis? As certain as I can be, without direct contact, Lyra replied. But mother, there's more. The mathematical frameworks I used to reach this conclusion, they came from human theoretical physics. Specifically, from work done by a physicist named Dr. Sarah Chun. Dr. Chun? That wouldn't happen to be the sister of Commander Sarah Chun, the human ambassador who spoke at the council session. Yes. The princess's patterns shifted to excited golds and blues. It appears that innovation runs in human families. Dr. Chen's work on quantum consciousness interfaces is decades ahead of anything we've achieved, despite humanity's relatively recent entry into galactic civilization. Queen Zarathul was quiet for a moment, then spoke with what sounded like renewed conviction. This makes your meeting with the human delegation even more crucial. Perhaps fate has guided us more than we realized. I'll meet with them immediately, Lyrayesh said, already moving toward the laboratory's exit. But, Mother, if my analysis is correct, we're not just facing an invasion. We're facing entities that think and perceive reality in ways we can't begin to imagine. Our usual diplomatic and military responses may be completely meaningless to them. All the more reason to embrace new ways of thinking, the Queen replied. Go, my daughter. See if these humans truly possess the insights we desperately need. 20 minutes later, Princess Lyrish entered the palace's diplomatic reception chamber. The room had been carefully designed to accommodate a wide variety of alien physiologies, with adjustable atmosphere composition, variable lighting, and gravity fields that could be modified for different species' comfort. The human delegation was smaller than she had expected. Only 3 individuals stood in the center of the vast chamber. Commander Sarah Chun, whom she recognized from the council recordings, an older man with graying hair and intense dark eyes, and a younger woman whose posture and bearing suggested scientific rather than military training. Your Highness, Commander Chun said, offering a slight bow that managed to convey respect without submission. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. May I present Dr. Marcus Webb, Director of Humanities Xenological Research Division, and Dr. Sarah Chun, Professor of Theoretical Physics at the Mars Institute of Technology. Princess Lyraesh approached the group, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to welcoming blues and greens. As she drew closer, she noticed something that surprised her. The humans showed no signs of intimidation or nervousness. Many galactic species found Zephyrians imposing, with their considerable height for arms and shifting skin patterns. These humans simply watched her with what appeared to be professional interest and genuine curiosity. Dr. Chun, she said, focusing on the younger woman, your work on quantum consciousness interfaces has been instrumental in my recent research. I'm honored to meet the mind behind such innovative thinking. Dr. Sarah Chun smiled, an expression that Princess Lyraesh had learned indicated pleasure and approval in humans. Your Highness, the honor is mine. I've studied Zephyrian biotechnology extensively. Your people's ability to create living computers that process quantum information is extraordinary. I've been hoping for an opportunity to learn how you achieve such biological-technological integration. Perhaps we can arrange for detailed exchanges, the princess replied, finding herself genuinely interested in the conversation already. But first, we should discuss the more pressing matters. I assume you've been briefed on the approaching entities? Dr. Webb stepped forward. We have, Your Highness. Earth's government has authorized us to share our complete scientific and military resources in addressing this threat. We understand that Princess Lyraesh has developed new insights into the nature of these entities using human mathematical frameworks. Princess Lyraesh gestured toward a seating area where the chamber's environmental systems quickly adjusted to provide optimal conditions for all 4 species present. Yes, though I should emphasize that your theoretical frameworks proved crucial to my analysis. Without human perspectives on quantum consciousness, I would never have recognized what we're truly facing. As they settled into the conversation area, the princess activated a holographic display that showed the approaching objects in 3-dimensional detail. Based on your sister's theoretical work, she said, nodding to Dr. Sarah Chun, I've concluded that these are not ships or constructed vessels. They are living beings, each one a vast quantum consciousness capable of processing information and making decisions on a scale we can barely comprehend. Commander Chun leaned forward, studying the display intently. Living beings that size would require enormous amounts of energy to maintain biological functions. What were they feeding on during their intergalactic journey? An excellent question, Princess Lyraesh replied, her patterns brightening with approval, and one that leads to disturbing implications. Our long-range sensors have detected what appears to be dark matter manipulation around the entities. They may be harvesting energy directly from the quantum vacuum itself. Dr. Webb whistled softly, a human expression of surprise. If they can manipulate dark matter and quantum vacuum energy, their power levels will be virtually unlimited. No wonder traditional military thinking seems inadequate. Exactly, the princess agreed. But there's something else. The formation patterns they're maintaining as they approach suggest coordination and purpose. They're not simply drifting through space. They're executing a plan. Dr. Sarah Chun had been quietly studying the mathematical displays surrounding the holographic images. Your Highness, these quantum signature analyses, you've identified what looks like communication patterns between the entities. You see it too? Princess Lyraesh felt a thrill of excitement that someone else could follow her reasoning. Yes, there are information exchanges occurring between them at frequencies and speeds that should be impossible over such distances. Not impossible, Dr. Chen said thoughtfully, if they're using quantum entanglement for instantaneous communication. But the power requirements for maintaining entangled systems over such distances. She paused, her expression showing the rapid mental calculations taking place. They need to manipulate space-time itself to create stable quantum corridors. Which brings us to the truly frightening possibility, Princess Lyraesh said quietly. If they can manipulate space-time, if they can communicate instantaneously across any distance, if they can harvest energy from the quantum vacuum itself, then they may be operating according to physical laws that we don't fully understand. The three humans exchanged glances, and Commander Chen spoke for the group. Your Highness, are you suggesting that these entities might not be bound by the same physical constraints that limit our civilizations? I'm suggesting that they may have evolved beyond the need for such constraints, the princess replied. Consider the implications. Beings that can think at quantum speeds, communicate instantaneously across any distance, and manipulate the fundamental forces of reality itself. How do you negotiate with something like that? How do you defend against it? Dr. Webb rubbed his chin thoughtfully. In human history, we've occasionally encountered situations where traditional approaches were completely inadequate. Sometimes the solution was to change the rules of engagement entirely. Change the rules how? Princess Lyraesh asked, genuinely curious about human perspectives. Well, Dr. Webb continued, there's an old human saying, if you can't beat them, join them. But there's another approach too. If you can't join them, confuse them. Commander Chin smiled at this. My brother James used to say something similar. When facing a superior opponent, the goal isn't to be stronger. It's to be so unpredictable that they can't anticipate your moves. Princess Lyraesh found herself fascinated by these human concepts. Zephyrian philosophy had always emphasized harmony, balance, and the search for elegant solutions. The idea of deliberately introducing chaos or unpredictability as a strategic tool was alien to her thinking, yet strangely appealing. Your Highness, Dr. Sarachin said, I'd like to propose something that might seem unusual. What if we're approaching the situation from the wrong angle entirely? How so? We're assuming these entities represent a threat because they're approaching our galaxy. But what if they're not invaders? What if they're refugees or explorers or something else entirely? What if our fear is based on assumptions rather than facts? Princess Lyraesh's patterns shifted rapidly as she considered this possibility. It's true that we have no direct evidence of hostile intent, but their size and power levels could be necessary for survival in intergalactic space, Dr. Chin finished. Think about it. To travel between galaxies, you need enormous energy reserves and protection against cosmic radiation levels that would destroy smaller vessels. The scale might be practical rather than aggressive, but their trajectory takes them through inhabited systems, Commander Chin pointed out. Maybe because inhabited systems are the only places where they expect to find the kind of intelligence they can communicate with, Dr. Webb suggested. If you're traveling to a new galaxy, wouldn't you want to make contact with the local civilizations? Princess Lyraesh felt her understanding of the situation shifting. These human perspectives, with their emphasis on alternative explanations and unconventional thinking, were opening possibilities she hadn't considered. So you're suggesting that instead of preparing for war, we should be preparing for first contact with entities unlike anything we've ever encountered, she said. Both, probably, Commander Chen replied pragmatically. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. But make sure our preparations don't accidentally create the worst-case scenario. What do you mean? If these entities are peaceful, but we greet them with weapons and defensive postures, we might provoke exactly the conflict we're trying to avoid. But if they're hostile and we approach them with open hands, we could be destroyed before we realize our mistake. Princess Lyrash nodded slowly. A delicate balance. This is why my mother proposed the alliance with humanity. You think about these problems differently than we do. Dr. Sarah Chun leaned forward. Your Highness, there's something else to consider. If these entities operate on quantum consciousness levels, traditional communication might be impossible. But there are theoretical frameworks for quantum-to-quantum interface protocols. You're talking about direct, mind-to-mind communication, the princess said, her excitement growing. But the risks would be enormous, Dr. Chun agreed. Direct quantum consciousness interface with entities of that power could overwhelm or destroy any mind attempting the connection. But if we could find a way to buffer the connection, to create intermediate interface layers, it might be possible, Princess Lyrash finished, her mind racing with possibilities. Zephyrian biotechnology could potentially create living buffer systems, organic interfaces that could handle the quantum information transfer without burning out. And human neuroplasticity might provide the adaptability needed to interpret truly alien thought patterns, Dr. Webb added. Our brains evolved to handle uncertainty and chaos. We might be better equipped than more logically structured minds to make sense of completely foreign consciousness paradigms. Commander Chun watched the growing excitement between the scientist and the princess with approval. Your Highness, I believe this conversation demonstrates exactly why Queen Zarathal's proposal has merit. Our species complement each other in ways that could prove crucial for the challenges ahead. Princess Lyrash looked at the three humans with new appreciation. In less than an hour of conversation, they had shifted her entire perspective on the approaching crisis. Instead of seeing only an insurmountable threat, she was beginning to see unprecedented opportunities for understanding and growth. Commander Chun, she said formally, I would like to formally request that your government consider my mother's proposal, not just as a political alliance, but as a partnership between our peoples in facing the unknown together. Your Highness, Commander Chun replied with equal formality, I believe my government will find your request very compelling, especially when they learn about the insights that have already emerged from just this preliminary discussion. As the meeting continued into the evening, Princess Lyrash found herself thinking about more than just scientific collaboration and diplomatic alliances. The humans' willingness to question assumptions, their comfort with uncertainty, their ability to find hope in seemingly hopeless situations. These weren't just useful traits for facing cosmic threats. They were qualities that she realized she admired and wanted to understand more deeply. Perhaps, she thought, her mother's proposal offered more than just strategic advantages. Perhaps it offered a chance for a genuine connection between species, between minds that could learn from each other in ways that pure alliance could never achieve. The approaching entities from beyond the galaxy might represent an unprecedented challenge, but they also represented an opportunity for unprecedented cooperation and understanding. And if the price of that cooperation was marriage to a human, Princess Lyrash was beginning to think it might be the most beneficial bargain her people had ever made. Hashtag the test of hearts, and Mine's Lieutenant Commander James Chun stood on the observation deck of the Earth starship Unconventional Wisdom, watching the impossible sight before him. The Zephyrian homeworld hung in space like a living jewel, its surface a constantly shifting tapestry of bioluminescent cities and organic technology. But what captured his attention weren't the planet's wonders. It was the massive construction project taking shape in orbit. Hundreds of ships from dozens of species worked in coordinated chaos around a structure that defied easy description. Part space station, part organic growth, part quantum mathematics, made manifest, the project represented the combined efforts of nearly every major civilization in the galaxy. At its heart, A massive chamber was being prepared for humanity's most ambitious attempt at interspecies communication. Impressive, isn't it? James turned to find Princess Lyra approaching along the observation deck's transparent corridor. Even after 3 months of working together, he still found her alien grace captivating. Her 4 arms moved in subtle gestures as she walked, her bioluminescent patterns shifting in colors that he was slowly learning to interpret as emotional expressions. "It's terrifying," he replied honestly. "In 6 hours, we're going to attempt direct consciousness contact with entities that could probably disintegrate our solar system by thinking about it too hard." The princess moved to stand beside him at the viewing portal. "Are you having second thoughts about volunteering for the neural interface team?" James considered the question seriously. When the call had gone out for test subjects willing to attempt quantum consciousness bridging with the approaching entities, he had been among the first to volunteer. The decision had seemed obvious at the time. Someone had to take the risk, and his family had a history of taking on impossible odds. But now, with the moment approaching, the magnitude of what they were attempting was almost overwhelming. "No," he said finally. "Someone needs to do this. And humans seem to be better at surviving impossible situations than most species give us credit for." Princess Lyrash's patterns shifted to warmer hues. "That's what I hoped you would say. But, James, I must tell you something important before we proceed." She turned to face him directly, her large violet eyes reflecting the light from her homeworld below. "The interface chamber we've constructed, it requires more than just volunteers willing to risk their minds. It requires a deep emotional connection between the interface subjects to provide stability during the quantum consciousness bridging." James felt a chill of understanding. "You're saying that for this to work, the human and Zephyrian test subjects need to genuinely care about each other, yes. The emotional resonance creates quantum entanglement patterns that help stabilize the connection." She paused, her patterns shifting to colors he hadn't seen before. "James, I know we've only known each other for 3 months, but we spent most of those 3 months working 18-hour days together, solving problems that nobody has ever faced before, and somehow managing not to drive each other completely insane." James finished with a slight smile. "Lyra, I think what you're trying to say is that somewhere along the way, this stopped being just about saving the galaxy." Her bioluminescent patterns brightened considerably. "For me, yes. The question is whether you feel the same way." James looked out at the construction project again, considering the path that had brought them to this moment. 3 months ago, he had been a starship engineer with a reputation for unconventional solutions. Now he was part of the most important diplomatic mission in galactic history, working with an alien princess who had somehow become the most important person in his life. "Lyra," he said quietly, 3 months ago, I thought love was something that happened between humans. I thought attraction was limited to my own species. But working with you, learning how your mind works, seeing your passion for impossible problems." He turned to meet her eyes. "I've never felt anything like this before. For anyone." The princess reached out with one of her 4 hands, gently touching his arm. "Then, you understand why my mother's proposal was never really about politics. She knew this would happen." "Zephyrians are very good at predicting emotional compatibility," Lyra said with what James had learned was her version of a mischievous smile. "My mother has been observing human behavioral patterns very carefully. When she saw how you and your family respond to impossible challenges, she realized that the right human might complement not just our society, but our hearts as well." James felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. So, when she announced the marriage proposal to the Galactic Council, she was creating the circumstances that would allow us to meet and work together under conditions that would reveal our true compatibility. Lyraesh's patterns shifted to deeper, richer colors. "But, James, the feelings that have developed between us, those are real. They're not the result of manipulation or calculation." Before James could respond, an urgent chime sounded throughout the ship. Captain Martinez's voice followed immediately. "All personnel to stations. The lead entity has begun broadcasting." They rushed to the nearest communication station, where a crowd of humans and aliens was gathered around displays showing incoming data streams. The information was unlike anything in their databases, complex patterns that seemed to shift between mathematical equations, musical harmonies, and something that might have been poetry in a language that predated thought itself. Dr. Sarah Chun, James's sister, looked up from her analysis station with an expression of wonder and terror. It's trying to communicate, but the information density is enormous. We're talking about terabytes of data per second, encoded in quantum fluctuation patterns that require our most sophisticated equipment just to detect. What is it saying? Princess Lyresh asked, moving to examine the data herself. That's the problem, Dr. Chen replied. We can receive the transmission, but we can't interpret it. The conceptual framework is too alien. It's like trying to read poetry written in mathematics that describes colors we can't see using emotions we've never felt. James studied the scrolling displays, watching patterns that seemed to pulse with their own inner rhythm. Something about the data structure reminded him of conversations with Lyra Esch, those moments when she would try to explain Zephyrian concept that had no human equivalent. What if it's not trying to convey specific information? He suggested. What if it's trying to establish baseline compatibility for communication, like saying hello in every possible way until it finds one we can understand? Princess Lyriesh's patterns brightened with excitement. That would make sense for a quantum consciousness operating on multiple dimensional levels simultaneously. It wouldn't know which aspects of reality we perceive, so it would try to communicate across all possible channels. Dr. Chin looked up from her instruments. If that's true, then our response becomes crucial. We need to answer in a way that shows our communication capabilities without accidentally sending wrong information about our intentions or nature. Or, James said slowly, an idea forming. We need to communicate in a way that's so fundamentally honest that misunderstanding becomes impossible. What do you mean? His sister asked. James looked at Princess Lyresh, feeling a certainty that surprised him with its strength. We've been thinking about this backwards. We're trying to craft messages that will convey the right information. But what if we just show them who we are? What if we use the quantum consciousness interface not to send carefully prepared diplomatic statements, but to let them experience human and Zephyrian consciousness directly? The princess's four hands moved in rapid gestures that indicated intense thought. That would be incredibly dangerous, James. Direct consciousness interface means they would experience not just our thoughts, but our emotions, our fears, our hopes. Our love for each other, James added quietly. Lyra, what if that's exactly what they need to understand? What if the most powerful communication we could send is simply showing them that despite our differences, despite coming from completely different species and worlds, we've found a way to care about each other? Dr. Chen's eyes widened as she understood the implications. You're talking about using your emotional bond as a communication medium. The quantum entanglement between your consciousness would create a resonance pattern that might be comprehensible to entities operating on quantum consciousness levels. It would also mean exposing our deepest thoughts and feelings to beings of unimaginable power, Princess Lyriesh pointed out. If they're hostile, if they decide to use that information against us, then we'll face the consequences, James said firmly. But, Lyra, think about what we've learned about these entities. They're vast, ancient, powerful beyond measure. If they wanted to destroy us, they could probably do it without breaking stride. The fact that they're trying to communicate at all suggests they're looking for something more complex than simple domination. The princess was quiet for a long moment, her patterns cycling through colors that James recognized as deep contemplation. Finally, she spoke. You're proposing to bet the survival of our civilizations on the hope that love is a universal language. I'm proposing that honesty is a universal language, James corrected. Love just happens to be the most honest thing I've ever experienced. Captain Martinez's voice came over the communication system again. Interface team to the quantum chamber. The entity has moved to within communication range, and the Council has authorized the attempt. As they made their way through the ship's corridors toward the quantum interface chamber, Princess Lyresh reached out and took James's hand with one of her four. James, if we do this, if we open our minds completely to these entities, there's no going back. They'll see everything we are, everything we feel for each other. Are you afraid of what they'll find? He asked. No, she replied, her patterns settling into steady, warm golds and blues. I'm afraid of losing what we've found, but I'm more afraid of not trying to save our galaxy. They entered the quantum interface chamber to find a space that looked like the intersection of a laboratory and a cathedral. Zephyrian biotechnology had grown organic interface pods that pulsed with their own inner light, while human quantum computers hummed with barely contained energy. At the center of the chamber, two interface chairs waited, one adapted for human physiology, one for Zephyrian. Dr. Chun and her Zephyrian counterpart, Dr. Kethnul, were making final adjustments to the equipment. "The interface is ready," Dr. Chun reported. "But I have to warn you both. Once the connection is established, you'll be linked not just to each other, but potentially to consciousness on a scale we can't imagine. If something goes wrong, we understand the risks," Princess Lyraesh said calmly. "Sometimes understanding requires the willingness to be vulnerable." James settled into his interface chair, feeling the neural connections activate around his head like a crown of light. Across from him, Princess Lyraesh took her position in the Zephyrian interface pod, her bioluminescent patterns brightening as the quantum field began to build. "Initiating consciousness bridge," Dr. Chun announced. "James, Lyra, remember, don't try to control what they see. Just be yourselves." The quantum field activated, and suddenly, James felt his consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of his own mind. He felt Princess Lyraesh's thoughts merging with his, her alien yet familiar mental patterns intertwining with his own. And then, like the sunrise over an infinite ocean, he felt the presence of something vast and ancient touching the edges of their joined awareness. The entity's consciousness was like trying to hold a star in his mind. Brilliant, massive, and operating according to principles that stretched his understanding to its limits. But instead of being overwhelmed, James found himself anchored by his connection to Lyraesh. Her thoughts provided stability, her love provided courage, and together they offered their combined consciousness to the alien presence. What followed was not communication in any traditional sense. Instead, it was a sharing of experience, emotion, and understanding that transcended language. The entity explored their merged consciousness with something that felt like curiosity and wonder, examining their thoughts and feelings with delicate precision. Through the connection, James felt the entity's response. Surprise at finding consciousness that operated on multiple levels simultaneously, amazement at the complexity that emerged from the interaction between two different types of thinking, and something that might have been joy at discovering that love could bridge gaps between completely different forms of life. And then, gently, and with what felt like gratitude, the entity began to share its own nature. James and Princess Lyraesh experienced consciousness that spanned galaxies, thoughts that took millennia to complete, love that encompassed entire star systems, and the countless forms of life they contained. The entities weren't invaders or conquerors. They were gardeners, tending the growth of consciousness throughout the universe, nurturing the development of love and understanding wherever they found it. They had come to this galaxy because they sensed something unprecedented, the rapid development of cooperative consciousness between species that had previously been isolated from each other. As the connection gradually faded, leaving James and Princess Lyraesh exhausted, but exhilarated, they understood that they had not just made first contact with cosmic entities. They had proved that love, understanding, and cooperation were forces that resonated across any gap, even the gap between galaxies. "Well," James said weakly as the medical teams checked their vital signs, "I think we can safely say that the galaxy is about to become a much more interesting place." Princess Lyraesh's patterns brightened with laughter. "Indeed. And I believe my mother's proposal has been definitively validated." The wedding of worlds, the grand cathedral of Zephyr Prime, had been transformed for an occasion unlike any in galactic history. The massive crystalline structure, normally used for the most solemn state ceremonies, now hosted representatives from every known civilization in the galaxy. Floating gardens of bioluminescent flowers created shifting patterns of light throughout the vast space, while the cathedral's living walls pulsed in harmonious rhythms that seemed to respond to the emotions of the gathered crowd. Commander Sarah Chun stood at the human delegation's platform, adjusting her formal diplomatic uniform one final time. Around her, the assembled dignitaries represented a stunning diversity of life forms. The crystalline entities from Andromex Prime chimed softly in harmonic conversations, while the energy beings from Corona systems pulsed with excited light patterns. Even Ambassador Kethvar of the Corvarian Empire was present, his scaled features showing what might have been grudging respect. But the most remarkable sight was the massive viewing screens that had been installed throughout the cathedral. These showed real-time images from orbit where the cosmic entities, the gardeners, as they had come to be known, maintained their positions in a protective formation around the Zephyrian system. The lead entity, a being of unimaginable size and beauty, had positioned itself so that its bioluminescent patterns created a backdrop of swirling colors across the planet's sky. "I have to admit," Dr. Marcus Webb said quietly, standing beside Commander Chun, "when I imagined first contact with alien intelligence, I never pictured it involving wedding planning." Commander Chun smiled, watching as the final preparations were completed around the central ceremony platform. 3 months ago, I would have said the same thing. Now I'm beginning to understand that maybe the universe operates on different principles than we assumed. The past month had been a whirlwind of revelation and transformation. After the successful consciousness interface with the gardeners, everything had changed. The cosmic entities had shared knowledge that revolutionized understanding of quantum mechanics, consciousness theory, and the fundamental nature of life itself. More importantly, they had revealed their role as cultivators of cooperative consciousness throughout the universe. For billions of years, the gardeners had traveled between galaxies, seeking out civilizations that showed potential for transcending their individual limitations through cooperation and love. They nurtured the development of interspecies understanding, sometimes subtly guiding events to create opportunities for growth, sometimes simply observing as species found their own paths to wisdom. The Human-Zephyrian Alliance, they had explained, represented something unprecedented. 2 species that had achieved deep cooperation not through conquest or necessity, but through genuine mutual respect and affection. The marriage between James Chun and Princess Lyra was not just a political arrangement. It was a symbol of what all galactic civilization could become. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings of all classifications, came the voice of the ceremony's host, Minister Veldar of the Intergalactic Diplomatic Corps. The bonding ceremony will now commence. The great cathedral fell silent as the formal procession began. First came the honor guards, not soldiers but representatives of every major scientific and cultural achievement from both Earth and Zephyr Prime. Human artists walked alongside Zephyrian biotechnicians, while Earth's greatest musicians shared the procession with Zephyr's most accomplished quantum mathematicians. Then came the immediate families, and Commander Chen felt her throat tighten as she watched her younger brother James emerge from the preparation chambers. He wore a formal Earth dress uniform, but it had been modified with Zephyrian biotechnology, living threads woven into the fabric created patterns that shifted in response to his emotional state, currently showing the deep blues and golds that indicated joy mixed with nervous excitement. Princess Loresh followed moments later, and a collective intake of breath echoed through the cathedral. Her ceremonial robes were a masterpiece of Zephyrian bioart, living fabric that seemed to flow like water while maintaining perfect form, embedded with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in harmony with her heartbeat. But what struck Commander Chun most powerfully was the way the bride and groom looked at each other as they approached the central platform. Despite all the cosmic significance of this moment, despite the presence of entities that spanned galaxies and representatives of dozens of civilizations, James and Lyra only had eyes for each other. Their connection was so obvious, so genuine, that it made everything else seem secondary. Queen Zarathul rose from her place of honor as the couple reached the platform. Her bioluminescent patterns were brighter than Commander Chun had ever seen them, cycling through colors that spoke of deep pride and overwhelming joy. "We are gathered here," the Queen began, her voice carrying the harmonic overtones that made Zephyrian speech so compelling, "to witness not just the union of 2 individuals, but the joining of 2 ways of thinking, 2 approaches to existence, 2 paths to understanding the universe and our place within it." She gestured toward the viewing screens showing the gardeners in orbit. "Our ancient guests have shared with us their perspective on the development of consciousness throughout the cosmos. They have seen civilizations rise and fall have watched species learn to cooperate or destroy themselves through conflict. Today, they witness something that gives them hope for the future of our galaxy. The Queen's four arms moved in complex patterns as she continued. The union we celebrate today is significant because it represents the voluntary choice to bridge differences, to find strength in diversity, to create something new while honoring what came before. James Chun of Earth and Lyra Yesh of Zephyr Prime have shown us that love can transcend any barrier, that understanding can overcome any difference. James stepped forward, his voice clear and strong despite the magnitude of the moment. Your Majesty, representatives of the galaxy, honored gardeners, 3 months ago, I thought I understood the limits of what was possible. I thought love was something that happened between similar beings, that understanding required shared backgrounds and common experiences. He turned to face Princess Lyra Esh, his expression showing the kind of wonder that comes from discovering that the universe is far more beautiful than previously imagined. Lyra Esh taught me that love isn't about similarity. It's about recognizing something precious in someone completely different from yourself. She showed me that understanding doesn't require shared experiences. It requires the willingness to learn from experiences you've never had. Princess Lyra Esh's patterns shifted to warm golds and brilliant blues as she responded. James showed me that courage doesn't always mean facing external threats. Sometimes the greatest courage is the willingness to open your heart to someone whose mind works completely differently from your own. He taught me that humans possess something remarkable, the ability to find hope in impossible situations, to create solutions where none seem to exist. She gestured with all four arms toward the assembled crowd. But this ceremony is about more than our personal feelings for each other. It's about proving that cooperation between species isn't just possible. It's the key to unlocking possibilities we never knew existed. Queen Zarathul nodded approvingly. Then, let us proceed with the formal bonding. James Chun, do you accept Lyra Esh not just as your partner, but as your guide to understanding perspectives you've never encountered? Ido, James replied firmly. Lyra Esh, do you accept James Chun not just as your companion, but as your introduction to ways of thinking that will challenge everything you thought you knew? I do, the princess responded, her patterns brightening to levels that filled the cathedral with shifting rainbows of light. Then, by the authority vested in me by the Galactic Council, by the blessing of the ancient gardeners, and by the hope of all our civilizations for a more cooperative future, I declare you bonded in marriage, united in purpose, and joined in the great work of building understanding between the stars. The cathedral erupted in celebration as species across the galaxy expressed their joy in dozens of different ways. The Corvarians hissed in approval, the Centaurians sang in harmonic choruses, and the humans simply cheered with the infectious enthusiasm that had endeared them to so many alien species. But the most remarkable response came from orbit, where the gardeners began a display unlike anything in recorded history. The massive entities pulsed with synchronized light patterns that painted the entire sky in shifting colors, creating a celebration that could be seen from the surface of 3 different planets. As the formal ceremony concluded and moved into the reception phase, Commander Chen found herself in conversation with Ambassador Kethvar. The Corvarian's attitude had undergone a dramatic transformation over the past month. I owe you an apology, Commander, he said, his serpentine head bowing slightly. When I first heard of your Queen's proposal, I thought it was madness. The Corvarian Empire has built its power on the assumption that strength comes from dominance, that cooperation is only possible between equals or through the submission of the weak. He gestured toward James and Princess Lyresh, who were surrounded by well-wishers from dozens of species. Your brother and the princess have shown us something that challenges our most fundamental assumptions. They have proven that cooperation based on mutual respect and genuine affection can achieve results that force could never accomplish. Commander Chen studied the Corvarian ambassador with interest. Ambassador, are you saying that the Corvarian Empire is reconsidering its approach to galactic relations? I'm saying that the Corvarian Empire cannot ignore evidence when it's presented so clearly, Kethvar replied. The gardeners have shared technological concepts that could revolutionize our understanding of physics. More importantly, They've made it clear that their cooperation depends on our willingness to embrace the same principles of mutual respect that your species has demonstrated. Throughout the reception, similar conversations were taking place as representatives from various civilizations grappled with the implications of what they had witnessed. The successful contact with the gardeners had proven that cooperation and understanding were not just idealistic concepts. They were practical tools for achieving unprecedented levels of development and growth. Dr. Sarah Chun approached her brother and new sister-in-law as the celebration continued around them. "So," she said with a grin, "how does it feel to be the most famous married couple in galactic history?" James laughed, his arm around Princess Laresh's waist while one of her 4 hands rested on his shoulder. "Terrifying and wonderful at the same time. Though I have to say, having cosmic entities as wedding guests definitely raises the bar for future anniversaries." Princess Laresh's patterns shifted to amused purples and greens. The gardeners have offered to share some of their knowledge about consciousness development across the galaxy. James and I will be working together to help establish the new cooperative research institute that they've suggested. Which means, James added, that our honeymoon is going to involve traveling to 17 different star systems to set up communication protocols with civilizations we've never met before. Dr. Sarah Chun shook her head in amazement. Only my little brother would consider first contact missions with unknown alien species to be romantic getaway planning. As the celebration continued into the night, the real significance of the day's events began to settle in. The marriage between James Chun and Princess Laresh represented more than just an alliance between Earth and Zephyr Prime. It was a symbol of what the galaxy could become when different species chose cooperation over conflict, understanding over suspicion, and love over fear. The gardeners had made it clear that they would remain in the galaxy for the foreseeable future, sharing their knowledge and guidance as the various civilizations learned to work together in new ways. The future that lay ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, and moments when the old patterns of conflict and competition would reassert themselves. But for the first time in galactic history, there was a proven model for how different species could not only coexist but thrive together. The marriage of James Chun and Princess Laresh had shown that love truly was a universal language, capable of bridging any gap and overcoming any difference. As the 3 suns of the Zephyrian system set behind the horizon, painting the sky in colors that matched the bioluminescent patterns of celebration throughout the cathedral, the galaxy embarked on a new chapter in its history. It was a chapter that would be written not by the strongest or the most advanced civilizations, but by those wise enough to recognize that their greatest strength lay in learning from each other. And at the center of it all, a human engineer and an alien princess danced together under the light of cosmic entities, proving that sometimes the most profound revolutions begin with the simple decision to open your heart to someone completely different from yourself. Hashtag the new galaxy 2 years after the wedding that changed the galaxy. Ambassador James Chunlash stood on the observation deck of the research station Harmony, watching as the impossible became routine. Through the transparent, aluminum viewing ports, he could see the construction of humanity's first interstellar city, a massive orbital habitat that housed representatives from over 60 different species, all working together on projects that would have been unimaginable just a few years earlier. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Zephyrian biotechnology provided the living support systems that adapted automatically to the needs of different species. Human modular design principles allowed for rapid expansion and reconfiguration. Corvarian energy distribution networks powered the entire complex with efficiency that amazed even their creators. And threading through it all was technology gifted by the gardeners, quantum consciousness interfaces that allowed beings of radically different mental architectures to share ideas directly. Still hard to believe, isn't it? James turned to find his wife approaching along the corridor, her bioluminescent patterns showing the warm colors he had learned to associate with contentment and joy. Princess Laresh, now Dr. Laresh Chinzarathal, according to the complex naming conventions they had developed for interspecies marriages, carried a data pad that pulsed with the subtle light of Zephyrian biodisplays. "What's hard to believe?" he asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "All of this," She gestured with three of her four arms toward the bustling activity visible through the viewing port. 2 years ago, most of these species barely tolerated each other. Now they're collaborating on projects that require absolute trust and perfect coordination. James smiled, following her gaze to where a team of Centaurians was working alongside human engineers to install quantum resonance chambers designed by Corvarian scientists and grown using Zephyrian biotechnology. I think the universe has been waiting for someone to prove that cooperation was possible. We just happen to be in the right place at the right time. With the right willingness to take impossible risks, Lyraesh added, her patterns shifting to amused purples. The council session tomorrow should be interesting. Are you ready to present our findings? James nodded, though he felt the familiar mix of excitement and apprehension that came with every major presentation to the Galactic Council. Over the past 2 years, he and Lyraesh had led research teams to 17 different star systems, establishing communication protocols with previously unknown civilizations and documenting the effects of cooperative consciousness development throughout the galaxy. The results have been extraordinary. Species that had been isolated for millennia were discovering that contact with alien perspectives accelerated their own development in unexpected ways. Technologies that had seemed impossible were becoming reality when different types of minds worked together on the same problems. Most remarkably, they were documenting the emergence of what the gardeners called hybrid consciousness, new ways of thinking that emerge from the interaction between different species' mental architectures. The Rigelian data still amazes me, James said, reviewing the highlights of their research. A species that had been stuck at the same technological level for 10,000 years, and 6 months of cooperation with human and Zephyrian researchers led to breakthroughs in dimensional physics. Because human intuitive leaps provided the creative spark that Rigelian logical precision needed, Lyraesh agreed. And Zephyrian emotional intelligence helped both species understand each other's thought processes well enough to collaborate effectively. They made their way through the station's corridors toward the central meeting chamber where the Galactic Council was preparing for its most important session in recorded history. The past 2 years had seen unprecedented changes throughout known space, and today they would vote on the Gardeners' proposal for the next phase of galactic development. The council chamber itself had been redesigned to accommodate the new spirit of cooperation that had emerged since the wedding. Instead of separate platforms for each delegation, the chamber now featured interconnected seating areas that encouraged informal interaction between different species. Translation systems have been upgraded with Gardner technology that conveyed not just words, but emotional context and conceptual frameworks. As James and Lyraesh took their places in the human-Zephyrian joint delegation area, they could see the remarkable diversity of beings that now work together as a single galactic community. Ambassador Kethvar was deep in conversation with representatives from 3 different species that had been enemies of the Corvarian Empire just 2 years earlier. The crystalline delegates from Andromex Prime were harmonizing with musical entities from the Vega system, creating complex musical mathematical equations that described new approaches to stellar engineering. Queen Zarathul rose to address the assembly, her 4 arms moving in the graceful gestures that had become familiar to representatives throughout the galaxy. Honored delegates, we gather today to consider a proposal that would have seemed impossible when this council was first established. The Gardeners have shared with us their observations of consciousness development throughout the universe, and they believe our galaxy has achieved something unprecedented. She activated a holographic display that showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy, with different colors indicating levels of cooperative consciousness development. 2 years earlier, the map would have shown isolated pockets of civilization separated by vast expanses of empty space. Now, it showed a network of connections spanning nearly every inhabited system. In just 2 years, we have achieved a level of interspecies cooperation that typically takes millennia to develop, the Queen continued. We have proven that differences in biology, psychology, and culture are not barriers to understanding. They are resources for solving problems that no single species could address alone. A new voice joined the discussion, one that came from everywhere and nowhere, carrying harmonics that resonated in the quantum consciousness interfaces throughout the chamber. The lead gardener was speaking directly to the assembled council. Young civilizations of this galaxy, the cosmic entity's voice seemed to come from the spaces between thoughts. You have surprised us. In our travels across the universe, we have seen thousands of galaxies develop over billions of years. Most follow predictable patterns. Species emerge, compete for resources, eventually either destroy themselves or achieve stability through dominance hierarchies. The entity's presence seemed to fill the chamber with a sense of vast perspective and ancient wisdom. Your galaxy has chosen a different path. In a cosmically brief period, you have demonstrated that cooperation can be more powerful than competition, that diversity can create strength rather than division, that love can be a practical tool for solving impossible problems. James felt Lyriesh's hand take his as the gardener continued speaking. Even after 2 years of marriage, he was still amazed by how their different types of consciousness complemented each other. How her Zephyrian intuitive wisdom combined with his human practical innovation to create insights that neither of them could have achieved alone. We propose to share with you knowledge that we have never shared with any other galaxy, the gardener announced. Techniques for transcending the limitations of single-planet existence, technologies for traveling between dimensions, methods for communicating across any distance instantaneously. But this knowledge comes with a responsibility. The chamber fell absolutely silent as the implications sank in. Technologies that could revolutionize existence itself, offered freely to a galaxy that had proven its commitment to cooperation. The responsibility, the gardener continued, is to use this knowledge not for the advancement of individual species or civilizations, but for the continued development of cooperative consciousness throughout the universe. You would become gardeners yourselves, traveling to other galaxies, nurturing the development of understanding and cooperation wherever you find it. Ambassador Kethvar was the first to respond. Great gardener, are you offering to make our entire galaxy part of your cosmic mission? We are offering you the opportunity to transcend the limitations that confine most civilizations to single galaxies and brief spans of cosmic time, the entity replied. But the choice must be unanimous. Every major civilization must agree to embrace the responsibilities that come with such knowledge. The debate that followed lasted for hours, as representatives grappled with the magnitude of what was being offered. Some species worried about losing their individual identities in a larger cosmic community. Others feared that the responsibilities would prove too demanding. A few wondered whether any civilization was ready for knowledge that could reshape the fundamental nature of existence. Through it all, James and Lyriesh found themselves serving as informal mediators, using their unique position as representatives of interspecies cooperation to help different delegations understand each other's concerns and find common ground. Finally, the debate reached its conclusion. One by one, each delegation cast their vote. The Corvarians voted yes, convinced that cooperation had already proven more effective than their traditional aggressive approaches. The Centaurians voted yes, excited by the possibilities for expanded consciousness development. The crystalline entities of Andromex Prime voted yes, their harmonic resonance indicating unanimous agreement. When the final vote was tallied, the result was unprecedented in galactic history. Unanimous agreement on a proposal that would reshape the future of civilization itself. Then, it is decided, Queen Zarathul announced. Our galaxy accepts the responsibility of becoming gardeners of consciousness throughout the universe. The celebration that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. Not just because of the magnitude of what had been achieved, but because it represented the first time that every major civilization in the galaxy was celebrating the same thing at the same time. As the formal session concluded and moved into less structured discussions, James and Lyriesh found themselves surrounded by representatives from dozens of species, all eager to discuss the implications of what lay ahead. So, Commander Sarachan said, approaching the couple with a bemused expression, how does it feel to know that your wedding was apparently the spark that transformed our entire galaxy into cosmic missionaries? James laughed, still somewhat overwhelmed by the day's events. Terrifying and wonderful, just like everything else that's happened since I met Lyriesh. His wife's patterns shifted to the deep blues and golds that indicated profound contentment. I think my mother knew this would happen when she first proposed the marriage alliance. Zephyrians are very good at seeing long-term consequences of emotional decisions. Are you saying Queen Zarathul planned all of this? Dr. Sarah Chun asked in amazement. Not planned, Lyriesh corrected, but she recognized the potential. She saw that humans and Zephyrians could create something together that neither species could achieve alone. She just didn't realize that something would end up reshaping the entire galaxy. As the celebration continued around them, James reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 2 years ago, he had been a starship engineer with a talent for unconventional solutions. Now he was part of a galactic community preparing to take on responsibilities that spanned the entire universe. The future that lay ahead would not be easy. Learning to use Gardner technologies would take generations. Developing the wisdom to guide other civilizations without imposing their own values would require constant growth and self-examination. There would be failures, setbacks, and moments when the task would seem impossible. But as he looked around at the celebration surrounding them, beings from dozens of species working together, learning from each other, finding joy in their differences rather than fear, James felt confident that this galaxy was ready for the challenges ahead. "You know what I think?" he said to Lyriesh as they watched the continuing festivities. "What?" "I think the universe has been waiting for proof that love actually works as a practical solution to impossible problems. And somehow, we ended up being the test case." Princess Lyriesh's patterns brightened to levels that filled their immediate area with warm, golden light. "Then, I suppose we'd better make sure we keep proving it works, hadn't we?" Outside the station, the gardeners maintained their protective formation around the system, their bioluminescent patterns creating auroras of celebration across the skies of inhabited worlds throughout the galaxy. For the first time in cosmic history, an entire galaxy had chosen cooperation over competition, understanding over suspicion, love over fear. And at the center of it all, a human engineer and an alien princess continued to prove that sometimes the most profound revolutions begin with two people from completely different worlds deciding to trust each other with their hearts. The galaxy was no longer just a collection of isolated civilizations struggling for individual survival. It had become something unprecedented, a community of consciousness dedicated to nurturing the growth of understanding throughout the universe. The age of the gardeners had begun, and it started with a simple truth that humans had always known, but the galaxy had needed to learn. Love really can conquer anything, including the vast emptiness between the stars.